All right, welcome to Steeler Country. I am Tony Serino. Today we are breaking down the defensive performance in that first preseason game against the Seattle Seahawks. See some of you already in chat. Appreciate that. Julia here says it's a Tony Thursday. That's right. Doing this live on Thursday to talk about the defensive performance, which not as good as the offense, certainly. A lot of people worried about this run defense in particular. That was a big cause of concern going into going into this preseason. How would they fix it? And we'll talk about that today. And let's start. I'm not gonna, we got to start with what I think is the biggest storyline in this preseason thus far, really in training camp in general, and that is the play of the linebackers. All the talk, of course, is Devin Bush and Robert Spillane, and which of these two players, is going to end up being the starter alongside Myles Jack. It is crazy that we are at this point. It is crazy to think that the Steelers traded up 10 spots in that draft to go up to number 10 overall, traded away a second and a third round pick to do so. They picked a player that 4 years later is not only, pretty much in his last year as a Steeler, but is in a real position battle with a guy like Robert Spillane, who didn't make he wasn't a starter last year. This is a guy last year, they weren't comfortable enough with him as a starter alongside Devin Bush. They went out and got Joe Schobert. And yet here we are today. And that's kind of where Devin Bush is at this point in his development. But I'm not going to, let's put to the side for a second the whole Devin Bush, Robert Spillane thing. And let's talk about where I thought was a real bright light on this defense. You're going to hear me talk about this tomorrow on AFC North Talk. This team is so lucky to have Myles Jack. They are so lucky to have Myles Jack. He was tremendous in this game. Didn't play very much. I think he played like 8 snaps. So, I'm going to do a little James Pierre thing. For those of you who heard me on Locked On Steelers and AFC North Talk a year ago, I built up James Pierre in the 10 snaps he had during the regular season back in 2020. But I think we know the player that Myles Jack can be. Certainly we remember going back to 2017 and when Myles was on the Jacksonville Jaguars and how much he absolutely destroyed the Steelers that season. We know the playmaker that he can be. And like I said, they're so lucky to have him. I thought he was great. Look, it's only 8 snaps. But he was good. He's been good in practice and in the reps that he's getting. Because again, he's one of those guys. So I think he's on a rotation already. I think Tomlin, Austin, Brian Flores, everybody knows about Myles Jack. Just get him healthy. Right? I mean, the problem at inside linebacker, as we'll talk about, is Bush and Spillane. But that's going to be very minimized this year. We're not going to talk as much about Devin Bush this year. If Myles Jack can play for 17 games this season, this whole Devin Bush is a bust, and I can't believe how bad Devin Bush is and all that, that's going to go to the wayside. Myles Jack was look, he had a very good play in coverage where I thought you saw his instincts in zone, he's kind of understanding his depth in coverage, keeping his eyes on the quarterback, but feeling the receiver around him, and then making a break at a running back when he saw the quarterback's eyes go that way. The quarterback didn't go that way. Geno didn't go to the running back. And so the receiver, as the play started to break down, the receiver ran upfield. You saw Myles have to turn his hips and accelerate. I thought he stayed stride for stride with the runner. I thought, positive signs in coverage. And then in run defense, we're talking about 8 snaps. I mean, I think he had 2-3 tackles in the game already. The two plays that I remember, the one is the 3rd and 1 play where, my goodness, Myles, it's the kind of play that we wish we could see from Devin Bush, right? Where Myles understands where the play is going, is elusive to stay clean. It's what Myles does so well, which is, as a linebacker, what you need to do is you need to stay clean, meaning that you can't let these guards, these fullbacks, right, the guy coming through the hole, get their hands inside of you and take you for a ride. Right? You got to stay clean so that you can make make your break on the ball. And I thought Myles did that so well on the play. He was awesome, man. Just kind of slid out of the way and made the tackle in the backfield on that 3rd down play. Yeah, he's because if this team didn't have Myles Jack, boy, they would be a disaster at the inside linebacker spot. Devin Bush, I have it written down here. I think he had one play in coverage that I thought he was a plus player. But other than that, not a whole lot positive to say about him in this game. Terrell Austin said about Devin the other day that, you can teach a guy to be in the right spot, but the problem for Devin is he's got to start making plays out there. I don't even know how much on tape Devin's really like. Is he really in? Well, I guess in this game he was much better about, kind of being around the ball. But to Austin's point, he's just allergic to playmaking at this point. I've always said about him, like you didn't draft a guy who's his size, 5'10", whatever he is, 220. You didn't draft that guy to take on the guard in the hole or whatnot. And you understood that he's probably going to get gobbled up a little bit in the running game. But my goodness, you think just about the play I was talking about with Myles, right? Where he stays elusive, doesn't let the guard get his hands on him, gets around and is able to make a play in the backfield, a tackle for loss on a big 3rd and 1 play. And then you look at play after play in this game with Devin, where he's right. I mean, he's there. He's all he's got to do is at the point of attack, either fight through the guard, fight through the fullback, and make a play at the ball. And he's just allergic. And even on the plays when he wasn't, I mean, there was a lot of times where he was the first guy there. He had to take on the guard, take on the fullback. And of course, he got washed out of the play, and other guys had to make the play behind him. But even on the play, even the couple of plays where that didn't happen, I mean, there's one everybody's seen, right? It's the run to the right where Devin has a chance to make the play on the ball, and he just kind of he's just kind of watching, just a spectator, like me up in the stands. He and I had the same impact on that play. He's just watching, just out here watching. Yeah, man, it's not good for Devin, and I think the problem is, you always want to give the benefit of the doubt. Right? Oh, it's only one preseason game. We can, he can potentially still, there's something, that could still happen here. But it's preseason game number 1 in in year number 4 for Devin. They didn't pick up his option. I hate, you guys know me. I don't usually get on players for their answers in the media and all that and all the kind of off the field stuff. But I really did think Devin's answer to that question the other day when he talked about, is this your last chance for the Steelers? Is this your last chance? And he's like, for what? For what? I'm still going to be in the NFL next year. I mean, have some pride in your play, man. You're not playing well out there. And I don't even know if Devin knows that. And I think it's unfortunate because, this is a guy who coming out of college I was very, very excited about. I remember draft night when they got him. And I think I stayed up till like 2 a.m. or 2:30 or something to record with Chris Carter. We were doing Locked On Steelers together. Chris was at a draft party, so he couldn't do the show after the first round ended. I had to wait for him to get back, and I was wired. I'm not going to sleep. I can't believe they just did this. I can't believe they got Devin Bush. Now, you would have told me that night that, 4 years later, you're going to be on your show in a preseason game talking about what a lost cause Devin Bush is. I would have told you you're crazy, but that's where we are. And the crazier part about it is that Devin's in a battle. I mean, Devin's in a battle with Robert Spillane. Spillane didn't have a good game. And the problem for Spillane is, I wrote this down a bunch of times here in my notes as I kind of took play-by-play notes here. Every time I wrote down Spillane, it was just athleticism. Like you can, I talked about the other day with Anthony McFarland that the problem for him in the past was that he had all this athleticism, but he was betrayed. He's kind of, his brain betrayed his feet. For Robert, it's the other way. I think Robert's a solid player. He's a veteran. Clearly, the coaching staff likes him. That's why they're giving him this battle against Devin. But he's just not an athlete. There's just times where I don't know what I expect Robert to do on the play because he's just, there was the play where it was kind of I think it was a broken coverage on one side between Cam and potentially Devin, where the running back just came completely free, wide open. And Spillane had to kind of make his way over and end up making the tackle. It's like, yeah, you like for him to get over there and make that tackle quicker, but that's who Robert is. I mean, he's not a sideline to sideline guy. So yeah, one of these two guys probably has to start. It's not going to be pretty either way, right? If it's Devin, we're going to be MFing, the Devin's lack of playmaking. And if it's Robert out there starting besides Myles, we're going to be doing the same thing when it comes to him in coverage against some of the more athletic players in this league. Right? I still go back to that day of camp where it was like back-to-back plays of Robert Spillane getting beat easily by Freiermuth down the seam. And then I think it was the very next play. It was McFarland. I think it was either a wheel or an out or, something like that, where he had to kind of run stride for stride with him. He just can't do it. I remember thinking to myself, how is Devin Bush in a position battle with a guy like Robert Spillane, who really shouldn't be on the field very often because it's so easy. Coaching staff, I'm sure coaching staffs are going to be licking their chops at this defense going like, well, we just got to, if it's Spillane out there on passing downs, we got to attack that guy because that's the weak link. But again, I go back to the idea here with the linebackers that this is a bad situation for the Steelers between Bush and Spillane. But they got Myles Jack, and so it's not a disaster. Myles Jackson go out there and make some plays for this team as he did on Saturday. Behind those two, I was interested to see Buddy Johnson got a ton of reps in this game, 45 reps in this game. Buddy's a really interesting player. I know he gets lost in the shuffle here as all we're talking about is those top three. And of course, we'll talk about Mark Robinson, who's been a highlight at training camp, and he certainly made a highlight play in this game. But Buddy, look, Buddy didn't have a good game. He didn't have a good game. But I'm so intrigued by him because I do feel like here's a guy who in college was very much that, raw, see ball, get ball type player. That's who he was back in college. And you can still see him kind of, it's like he's fighting that. Yeah, I feel like instinctually it's starting to come around for him. Felt like so many times in this game, he was on the verge of making a play, and then it was kind of these pitter patter. Is this what I'm supposed? Is this my gap? It was just a little too tentative for me. Still very clearly a young player who's in his own head. A lot of times felt like that for me watching Buddy out there on a play-to-play basis. But I feel like and the same thing with the I thought the broken tackle that he had or the missed tackle he had was very much the same thing. But it felt like, boy, this guy's he's a step away. It's not going to be a this year thing. And you do wonder with him, is there a roster spot for him at this point? Obviously, those first three guys we talked about, they're all going to make the roster. Myles Jack, Devin Bush, Robert Spillane. Are Robinson, Johnson, and Marcus Allen, who didn't play in this game, are they fighting for two roster spots? Are they fighting for one? Because if they're only fighting for one, Mark Robinson obviously made that huge play at the end of the game. He had the play off the edge, unblocked, bang, strip sack, gave this team a chance to win the game at the end. Huge play. It was a huge play, and obviously that's the highlight reel, and that's what we're all going to talk about with Mark. He is, though, I didn't realize I don't know if I want to call him a sub-athlete at this point because I've only seen him in one game thus far, but clearly he's not a sideline-to-sideline guy. I thought he struggled out there just from an athletic standpoint of, just kind of keeping up, which was tough for him because, he's a thumper, man. He certainly had, like I said, at camp, there are those times where like, yo, that was Mark Robinson. I want to see more of that. And obviously we saw that in this game, right? He had the play off the edge. But I do worry about athletically if, again, does he kind of peak out at a guy like Robert Spillane, just from an athletic standpoint. So, bottom line here at linebacker, I think Myles Jack, just put the kid in bubble wrap and just pray that he can play all 17. Because if he can play all 17, and all of a sudden the Steelers turned what was a massive negative for them at inside linebacker into a semi-positive. I mean, they got a guy in Myles Jack who could be the fourth best player on this defense. You think about Myles Jack and everything he's done in his career. Now he can be the fourth best player on this defense. That makes this, it makes this position in general far less of a disaster than it was. And it certainly is a massive plus for this defense who's missed his kind of playmaking at that linebacker position. I do want to mention, by the way, I didn't put the banner up, but I do want to mention that going to do potentially a Q&A at the end of the show. So if you have any questions or comments or anything on the defensive side of the ball, leave them in chat. We'll get to that at the end of today's show. Now let's go over to the edge rusher because this is going to be pretty quick talking about the edge rushers on Saturday. It's going to be pretty quick talking about this one. They were all bad. Yeah, they were all bad. It started with Tuska and what's his name? Delonte Scott. Boy, oh boy. All right. I sat on the other show. It was nice watching the offense because so much of what happened in camp translated from what I saw in practice every day. And then you watched it in the game and, it was either the same or the reasons why it was different made sense. Right? When we talk about the Trubisky thing, Trubisky going up against the first team defense is playing very well. When he goes up against worse defenses, it should be easier for him. Right. Okay. So all that made sense. Delonte Scott, I thought, was showing out in camp. I thought he was kind of the best of the rest. When we talk about, we know the top three on this team are going to be TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, and I think Jannard Avery is a roster lock at this point as far as the third edge rusher on this team. But I thought Scott was making a name for himself and potentially could be that fourth guy on the roster. Holy cow, Delonte Scott got a welcome to the NFL game. I mean, I wouldn't even say it was a moment. I mean, the moment is obviously when he gets kind of flipped over backwards on a bench, just get pancaked, right? The guy got kind of rolled over on that play. Yeah. Yeah, a welcome to the NFL moment for Delonte Scott all game long. Tuska did nothing. Tuska was not a whole lot to say about him. I thought the best of them was Hamilcar Rashad. I thought he had a couple nice plays here and there, but I know, and this is another position where everybody's kind of like, oh my goodness, the Steelers are screwed at edge rusher. This is a disaster. Okay. Yes, the fourth edge rusher spot for the Steelers is certainly not good right now. You know, if it's going to be Tuska, maybe Rashad makes his name and gets himself on the roster. But certainly, I think we all saw on Sunday or on Saturday, like they're not working with a whole lot here. There's no like, you know, Ola Adini or Tuzar Skipper who's going to lead the preseason in sacks on this roster this year. But if this team loses TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith again, like they did last year, I mean, they had times last year where both guys were dealing with injury. You know, I think TJ was dealing with the hamstring and then the rib, and I think it was hamstring all year for Alex Highsmith. Yeah, I mean, if that happens to this team again, they're going to be in a really bad spot. But we're talking about the team going down to their fourth player at a position. What roster in the league right now are you talking about at the edge rush position where a team can legitimately go four deep and say like, yeah, you know, we're not going to lose that much. Obviously, if any team in the league is going to lose a bunch at edge rusher if you're going down to this spot. So I don't think the Steelers are in a good situation. I'd love to be talking today about, man, how many edge rushers they have and who they could keep. But let's understand this is the back end of the roster. I still feel very comfortable, obviously, about TJ. Still feel comfortable about Highsmith. And I like Avery. I like Avery. The only problem for Avery is he just keeps getting hurt. He needs to stay healthy. I want to see what he can do if he can stay healthy and play in this game in Jacksonville. But nothing much to say about these edge rushers. They were not good. All right, let's go over to the defensive line. This is another place where I think people are getting a little too concerned, and I don't agree with the concern. And the reason for that is, look, let's just start at the top on who played in this game and who didn't. No Cam Hayward in this game, obviously. Why would Cam play? Cam got hurt, by the way, during practice. Seems like he's going to be okay. He got his ankle rolled up potentially. He did get carted back. I guess they did some tests. It seems like he's going to be okay. But I would guess that's going to, they're going to shut him down between now and that game in Cincinnati in week 1. But no Cam Hayward in this game. No Ogunjobi in this game. No Tyson Alu in this game. And no Montravius Adams in this game. That's 4 guys. You're talking about the Steelers are either going to keep 6 or 7 guys total at this position. You're talking about the top 4 of those. Well, maybe not the top 4, but 4 of those 6 or 7, all those guys I talked about are roster locks. They didn't make they didn't play. So yeah, I mean, things were going to be a little rough out there for a defensive line that we already knew coming in was, and we saw it last year. The back end of this room, because the Steelers got to the back end last year with all the injuries and stuff they had last year. Yes, not good. I mean, we knew that. Henry Mondo. I thought it wasn't a surprise to me that Henry Mondo was real bad out there on Saturday, and he was real bad. But let's start with the 3 guys that I do think are going to make this roster and I think are going to get some minutes this year. And we'll start with Chris Wormley, because Chris Wormley was the one guy who we saw get a bunch of minutes a year ago, and he was good last year. Well, he was good enough. I mean, I wouldn't say he was kind of a plus player overall. You know, he had 6, 8 sacks, something like that last year. I mean, no one thinks he's a great pass rusher, right? I mean, I think he was much like Henry Mondo got a sack in this game. Chris Wormley got a bunch of sacks last year because he was playing on a defense that was surrounded, where he was surrounded by talent. He obviously wasn't surrounded by talent on Saturday. I thought he had a really poor game, really, really poor. And he's been so, he's so good at his kind of hand usage and keeping guys from getting inside him so that he can kind of manipulate and go where he needs to go. And I thought he's done that so well throughout his career. Boy, that was not him in this game, and he was getting pushed around, bullied out there. I mean, Wormley clearly, obviously, is going to be better as you put better talent around him, because he won't be facing so many double teams. But still, in this game, it wasn't just the double teams that were washing him down the line. I mean, this was on a play-to-play basis. It was tough to watch for him. Now, as I said, we Wormley got 600-700 snaps a year ago, and we know what kind of player he was. He was fine. He was just a guy, and that's pretty much what the Steelers are going to ask for him again this season. So I'm not going to let this one game, be like, oh no, Chris Wormley can't play anymore. Like we saw a bunch of him a year ago. I'm not necessarily as worried. The 2 guys I was excited to see in this game were the 2 young guys, Isaiah Loudermilk and DeMarvin Leal on this defensive line. I thought Loudermilk was good. I thought Loudermilk was real good. in this game. He's very strong. I mean, what a strong, holy cow. This bull rush, when he gets his hands up inside that old lineman, I'll meet you at the quarterback. You and I are taking a ride. We're going for a ride at the quarterback. Yeah. Loudermilk was good, especially in that the pass rush he has. Again, like I said, the kind of bull rush. Obviously, he's not as kind of fine-tuned as Leal. We'll talk about Leal in a second. But yeah, I think Loudermilk, it's a question of how much of Loudermilk are they going to have to use this year when you talk about they have Wormley already. They have Ogunjobi as that pass rusher. How much of Loudermilk are they going to need to see this year? I think, this was an impressive performance early on from Loudermilk. Again, interested to see what he can do in the next couple games. But I know we all kind of poo-pooed this pick, or it was kind of an oh, by the way pick a year ago. I liked what I saw on Saturday from him, as did what I saw from Leal. Now, look, I knew coming in that Leal was going to be more of a pass rushing specialist early on. That's what he did at A&M. It's what he kind of projected to be early on. He has to put on all this weight. I think he went from 270 to 300 now. So you knew he's going to be better, certainly better as a pass rusher. I think the cross chop that he has, whoo, baby, he's got some juice to him, man. I mean, this kid, we talk about you go from 270 to 300. How much of that athleticism, how much of the quickness, how much of the burst that we saw from him at A&M is going to go away? Not much. I mean, these guys, again, it wasn't like the Seahawks have this fantastic offensive line, and it wasn't like this this defense was going up against the creme de la creme or anything like that. But I thought both guys in Loudermilk and Leal put some good things on tape, some nice things to build on. We talk about the young guys on this D line, who I'm sure they're going to get worked in at times. It's just a question of how much are the Steelers going to have to use a guy like Leal or a guy like Loudermilk? Because when we talk about Montravius Adams and Tyson Alualu and Kim Hayward, Larry Ogunjobi, those are the guys who are going to be counted on to turn this defensive line around from what it was a year ago. But I think the Steelers got a couple young guys in Leal and Loudermilk who, even if they aren't plus players in 22, I think they're starting to put some things on tape that make you believe, give it some time. But these two guys could eventually be something. All right, so that takes us through the defensive. As far as the other guys on the defensive line, I guess I shouldn't skip them, right? Henry Mondo was awful as a nose tackle in this game. Absolutely awful. The Steelers need one of Alualu. We just got to pray. Just pray that one of Alualu or Montravius Adams gets healthy and gets healthy quickly. Because if they have to put Mondo out there in base sets as a nose tackle, forget about this run defense. I mean, see ya. Bet the over. I mean, I don't know if you can bet on like rushing totals in a game, but if Henry Mondo is starting a game for the Pittsburgh Steelers, bet the rushing total over for the opposing team. Henry Mondo is just not good. And again, this guy played 250, 300 snaps for this team a year ago. Whew. Yikes. Yeah. And then the Davis brothers, no. I think it's pretty clear now that the 6 or 7 guys that the Steelers are going to keep they're known. It's just a question of, do they keep 6 of them? Do they keep 7 of them? And you do worry, though. If I was Chris Wormley, to be quiet, I know he put a bunch of stuff on tape last year, and he was solid for this team. But performance is like Saturday. He does that a couple more times in his preseason. He could find himself on the chopping block when we get to the 53. All right, so we're done with defensive line. We did edge rusher. We did linebacker. Let's go over to corner. My player to watch in this game at corner, if you watch that video I did on, was it Thursday or Friday of last week before the game? My player to watch out of the cornerback room was Levi Wallace. So Levi Wallace needed to have, he missed a bunch of time in camp with an illness, and I thought he needed to have a good, strong preseason to kind of prove to this team, hey, I can be a reliable outside corner for you, especially in those passing downs, so they can feel comfortable moving Cam Sutton back to a nickel position, that slot position that we know that he can play so well. And I thought Wallace was very strong in this game. One of the best defensive players the Steelers had out there. And I think he didn't get that many reps. I think he played into the second team, actually. I'm going to look up his reps. 23 total snaps in this game. He played into the second unit. I saw, Pierre came out there after Sutton left the game, but they left Levi out there to get him more reps. And I thought, Levi was he was targeted one time in this game. It was an incomplete pass. I thought, here's a guy who, Levi Wallace to me he's kind of the gunner of the defense, right? The gunner, we saw Gunner on the offense, right? Just not a flashy player by any stretch, but the guy will make a play here and there. I think Levi is that same guy, right? He's not going to be a flashy corner. I don't think he's going to lead the league in interception. I don't think he's going to be a big turnover guy. I don't think you're going to see Levi Wallace, guarding, going one-on-one against Jamar Chase. But he's exactly what Tomlin loves, which is that kind of do-it-all type player. He'll put his nose in there in run defense. He's super solid in man-to-man. He's responsible in zone. I think, again, there's a good start for Wallace, a guy who missed some camp. We know what a player he is, and what Buffalo liked about him. It's about him kind of adjusting to this system and proving to this coaching staff that he can be that quality corner on the outside. The other guy that needs to prove that as well is Ahkello Witherspoon, Ahkello Witherspoon, I know a lot of people ask about this team, who's going to be CB1, who's going to be, they don't have a CB1 on this team. I mean, they don't. You're right about that. They do not have, your tradition. You think about the rest of the AFC North, right? The Steelers do not have a Marlon Humphrey. They don't have a Denzel Ward. I mean, they barely, Awuzie, right? I don't know if the Steelers have a guy on that level. But Ahkello Witherspoon and what he put on tape at the end of last season was close. I mean, he had what? 45% completion percentage against in those last 6 or 7 games that he came in and started. 3 interceptions in those games, no touchdowns given up. Didn't give up. I don't think he gave up even 50 yards in a single game as a starting corner for the last, 6-7 games of the year last year. Witherspoon played really well at the end of last year. And so, look, small sample size, fine. Put some good stuff on tape. Can he continue that as we go? He didn't get a ton of chances in this one, but I thought Witherspoon was very willing, kind of coming down. Loved him coming downhill in this game. Got himself hurt that way, which I was very concerned about. He had a stinger in this game, so he kind of walked off, not using the arm whatsoever, just kind of hanging there, right? It's just walking out, giving high fives like this. Broken arm or stinger? Broken arm, stinger. Hard to tell. Hard to tell sometimes. Ends up just being a stinger. Avoided that one, but the Steelers couldn't really. That'd be tough to lose Witherspoon, especially in preseason game 1. I liked, it's I think he played 6 snaps in this game, but I liked what he showed, liked what he did coming downhill in this one. Cam was fine. Cam was Cam in this one. I don't think we're going to need to watch much. It's surprising to me, really, that Cam is getting as many reps as he is. I don't think he got probably the same, 16 or so in this game. I mean, we know who Cam Sutton is at this point. Arthur Maulet continues to be this the player that the Steelers, I think, want to use in these rundown situations, but he is kind of a liability down the field when you talk about his ability to cover on the back end. There was a play on a post route at the end of the first half where he was kind of in trail the entire time. Just seemed uninterested in the play. Maybe he was expecting help. Not sure, but boy, it was a weird play. It's a weird play. Again, I think the Steelers, their plan very clearly with this secondary and with this defense in general is to be very, very multiple. Are you talking about they want Maulet as that guy when they want to blitz off the edge? We saw what a good rusher he is last year. He can be a quality guy in run defense or short yardage situations. I think they like him in that role. They'll switch out Cam in that spot when it comes to the more pass heavy downs. This team is very clearly going to use a lot of dime this year. They love Trey Norwood. We'll talk about Trey Norwood here in a second because I thought he might have been the best defensive player on the field, not named Myles Jack for the majority of that football game. So again, Maulet's going to get kind of mixed in here. It seems like very, very similar to what they did a year ago, which is I think Maulet in these kind of early down, run down situations, and then you bring Cam in that situation. If you're in nickel or you're in dime, Cam kind of moves inside. Can we talk about James Pierre for a second? My dog. I got multiple people tweeting at me during the game, after the game. Tony, you left the Pierre hype train too early. Maybe I did. I thought Pierre had a decent enough camp, made some nice plays on the ball. He was good. He was straight up just good in this game. Had that nice pass breakup. They didn't really go his way very often. Not a bad thing to say right now about James Pierre. It's just, I think we all remember what happened to him, mid-season last year, right? And that's not going away. One good preseason game again, one good camp and one good preseason against Seattle is not going to erase the memory of watching him get toasted a couple times last year. So, I know I'm supposed to be the leader of the hype train. I will, if he has another one like that against Jacksonville, we may have to, we can back on, baby. But not yet. I know it's unlike me, but I'm going to Be cautiously optimistic with James. Justin Lane didn't come in the second team. He came in third team behind Patel. That was weird. That was weird. Because Patel went out there and just was not good himself. He had the awful missed tackle down the sideline. He was the one, if you watched the last video, I was wondering, was that Lane who missed the tackle down the sideline? And Pierre, by the way, comes across the field to make that tackle downfield. That was Patel. It was Patel who made that, or who missed that tackle. Yeah, I mean, if Lane has moved down the depth chart, then the Steelers may only end up keeping 5 at corner. And this may be a spot where we start talking about, somewhere else on the roster they could potentially keep another guy. Although I think, let's just go right over to safety. Because this room got good. Remember when we used to talk about the Steelers safety room being so thin, especially behind Minka and behind Edmonds? Not thin anymore. Certainly not thin anymore. I thought Terrell Edmonds was fine in this game. He was very Terrell Edmonds-esque in that he's not a playmaker, but he's solid. He's just a solid player at this point in his career. And I understand that, the fact that he was that first round pick that year is always going to hang with him, and Steelers fans are always going to expect him to be something he's not, which is, again, that elite playmaker in the secondary. He's not that guy. But yeah, I think for who he is, he's what the Steelers need, which is kind of the cog in the wheel, someone who they can reasonably rely on. He's maybe not the best in coverage, but he'll come downhill in the running game. You saw him do that a couple times. And that Myles Jack play we talked about, Edmonds came nicely downhill, kind of crushed through that line. If Jack wasn't there to make the tackle, I think Edmonds probably would have got the stop as well. They kind of met at the running back. Demonte Casey, not as good in this game in coverage as I'd seen in camp. I think he lost a couple times. Probably not as good in those kind of man up situations that they put him in this game as he was in camp, as kind of that single high type. Still like what I saw from him. Again, I'm not going to complain about the Steelers having a third safety who isn't perfect. As I said, I don't know that the Steelers maybe need to be putting him in as many man up situations as they did on Saturday. But from what I've seen in camp, as a single high, as someone who can come in those situations, if the Steelers want to move Minka around, 3 safety sets, that kind of thing, if they want to bring the dollar defense back, I think Casey's a quality player off the bench. And that takes us to Trey Norwood, who played the most reps of anybody on defense, got 47 snaps out there. And this kid, all you heard about last year this time was how much this team loved Trey Norwood, loved how smart he was, loved his intelligence, and how much they wanted to be able to get him on the field. And they did early. I mean, Norwood was a big part of why this team beat the Bills last year. And Norwood, man, holy cow, he was all over the place on Saturday. I think he was targeted 4 times, didn't have no completions against. I think he had a couple passes defended. This kid, you can tell why this team wants to, people keep talking about this dime defense that Austin and Tomlin and everybody are talking about, and this team may employ more dime defense this year. And people get on Bush because Bush is going to come off the field in that situation. And but I don't know that that's why the Steelers are going to run dime. Right? I think they're going to run. I think the Steelers are going to run more dime this year because they just really love Trey Norwood. They want to figure out ways to get that kid on the field. And Norwood's another one of these players who, if you listen to Tomlin's interview on the Pivot, he talks about these guys, right? The guys that are undersized and aren't superior athletes, but they still make it because of how much they work. How smart they are, and how much you just got to have that dog in you, as they say now. You got to be that guy. If you're undersized and you're not athletic, how do you make it in the National Football League filled with all these guys who are superior athletes, or bigger dudes? I think Norwood proves that you got to be a super smart dude, and you got to get on the right side of the coaching staff. But certainly he's done that thus far. He's the second year guy getting a bunch of reps in camp in the preseason. I would expect that that's probably going to continue throughout the preseason. They're going to try and get ways for him to get him on the field because it seems like that dime package is going to be used more significantly this year, and Norwood clearly going to be a big part of it. So overall, my overall thoughts of the defense are this. I think we're making too much of a big deal about the overall play of the defense, which was clearly not good. This was not a good overall defensive performance. But as you dig into it, and I don't want to sound like a homer here, right? Where it's like, oh, we're just going to make apology, and we're just going to apologize for the fact the Steelers had a bad defensive performance. But preseason is not about team, how the team comes together. It's about individual guys. How did this guy look? How did this guy look? Because again, the collective is not together yet. And very clearly, this defense was collectively not together. All their playmakers weren't there. I mean, all their best players didn't play, other than guys like Kim Sutton and Myles Jack and the like. So I thought, digging in a little bit, I was, from the defensive line perspective, I was impressed with what I saw from those young guys. Obviously, Wormley was the big outlier there. I don't know what happened. It's just not what he put on tape a year ago. I think at the linebacker spot, while yes, we can all sit here and bemoan the fact that the light never came on for Devin Bush, and this team may need to start a kind of sub-athlete like Robert Spillane. But Myles Jack is here. Myles Jack is here to save the day. And then at corner, once again, I understand the back end of this roster may not be great when we start talking about guys like Justin Lane and Platel and whatnot. But I thought Levi Wallace did exactly what he needed to do. And that's really the big battle here. We're talking about that top end of the corner class. And, how does this team replace Joe Hayden and what's the future of this room? Again, I thought Witherspoon was nice for the couple plays he was out there, especially, as I said, coming downhill in that running game. I thought Wallace was fine. I think there's a lot to build on here defensively, even in a performance where, on the face of it, seemed like not a great outing overall. All right, let's get to the comments here. Ooh, we got a lot of comments today. Appreciate that. Remember, if you are here and this is your first time, appreciate you coming. Make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel. Julie says, I watched Devin Bush. He was always late to the dance. I don't know that I'd say he was so much late as it was once again that kind of just being allergic to the playmaking. I thought there were times where he did a good job of getting himself to the hole, did a good job of putting himself in position to potentially make a play. But then we got there and nothing happened. Classic Devin Bush, It's like it is. I understand where Terrell Austin is coming from, where it's like you just can't teach a kid to make plays, right? You could tell him the X's and O's. You can tell him, hey, this is your responsibility. This is where you need to be. When you see this, do this. But you can't get him to you can't go out there and play for him. And I think that's the issue for Devin. Sam says, Tony's forever the optimist. That is a funny comment. I'm going to pin that one. Post that on the video after this is over. And I'm going to pin that one because a lot of people call me Tony the hater. Steelers fans don't feel like I'm an optimist. They feel like I am more of a hater. So, Mighty Zero here says they go extra DB instead of Bush. I think that is, I don't know if that's the plan. Okay, let's talk about this whole dime defense thing because it has kind of been the storyline this week. I guess they worked on dime. I'm not there at camp, but I guess they worked on it a ton at practice this week. And it seems like, this is another one of those things where they could potentially use more dime this year than they used in the past. But remember, what was it, like 3 or 4 years ago? There was that whole training camp where they kept talking about the dollar defense, or they're going to use this dollar defense. We're going to be like another DB on the field. We're going to take another guy off. We're going to put another DB on. I think they're going to play with like 4 down linemen, 2 DTs, 2 edge rushers, and then 7 defensive backs, essentially. And I think they employed that defense that season one time. Now they're gonna do dime more than once this year, but I'm not ready to buy into the idea that this is we're gonna run dime 30% of the time or something like that this year. I'm not ready to go there yet. I do think they want to get Norwood on the field though. I think it's less about Bush, more about Norwood. But you're putting Norwood on the field, you're taking Bush off. It's good. Oh, we got a Ferrari fan. Oh, I see. Okay, so this is an F1 comment. We waste a lot of time on this. Ferrari's the worst coach team in sports. Ferrari is the worst coach team in sports. Those of you who watch Formula One, you'll understand that. All right, what else we got? Joel says drafting an inside linebacker high is just not worth it. Well, I don't know. I mean, that same draft, they got Devin White over in Tampa. He's been pretty solid for him. So I think generally speaking, you're probably right. Just kind of, 50,000 foot view, should you be taking off-ball linebackers in the top 10 of the first round? Probably not. Probably not. Obviously, that class, you kind of wish maybe the Devons were reversed, All About Football says, greetings from Germany. Love your analysis. You're always like a pro beat reporter. Is Jack leading the Steelers in tackles in 22? Well, it better not be Minka again. I'll say that. It better not be Minka again. You would hope that the front seven this year can hold up a little more where Minka doesn't have to become this kind of elite run defender like he became last year. I do think, though, first of all, to answer your question, yes, I do think Myles Jack, as long as he stays healthy, yeah, I think Myles Jack will lead the team in tackles. It may not even be particularly close, to be quite honest with you. But I do think there's the kind of the plus of last season when we talk about Fitzpatrick and all the tackles he had to make. Remember, he led the team in tackles here, go over 100 tackles for Minka. And they say he was a bad tackler in years past. I do think that kind of made him a better player overall, though. Minka was he was kind of a sub tackler those first couple of years. And last year, he was at last line of defense so often. He had to come down and run defense so often last year because, my goodness, the front seven could not stop anybody. I think it's going to make him a better player overall. I do. I think when it comes to just the reps, right? I mean, how often is Minka repping run defense? He's certainly not doing it in camp at all. And he, as far as in game situations in years past, it was just not something that was his responsibility. So when it was time, when his number was called, he wasn't great at it. But I think last year he got good. Minka got good at run defense last year. Let's see. Mighty Zero says almost a trading up for Bush, and then Mike not making him battle for a start his rookie year turned him into a diva. Well, no, he did make him battle for a start. He didn't start every game that year. I'm going to have to look it back up. Wasn't that the year with Barron? Am I misremembering? But I believe that was the year with Mark Barron, and Mark Barron and Vince Williams were your starters, and Bush worked in that year. I mean, Bush played a bunch. I think he played a bunch of minutes that year. But no, I think Tomlin did. Look, this is all. Look, I don't want to say that the coaching was an aspect here. We could talk about the ACL. This is just Devin Bush. Devin Bush isn't a good player. I don't know that this is a Steeler. Like, it's Mike Tomlin thing. This is a Keith Butler thing. This is a Jerry Olszewski thing of the coach before Brian Flores, right? And the Steelers have done everything in their power this season. Like, one final push. Let's just figure if we can get this guy over. Devin's going to be playing this year with Brian Flores as his position coach. I mean, Brian Flores, a guy who should be a head coach in this league, is his position coach. You got the best talent he's played with as far as being next to Myles Jack. This will never be better for Devin, right? And this is the most mature he's going to be as a Steeler. I mean, this is it. This is last year as a Steeler. So it's kind of do or die for him now, right? He's a year off of the ACL. This is it. We got to see it all put together. And the fact that, once again, I'll go back to the idea that the reason why I kind of know it's over for Devin, and I will be shocked beyond all belief if Devin is anything other than a sub player for this team this year, or a minus player, I should say, for this team this year, is the fact that we're year 4 and there's no improvement. It's the same old thing with Devin. It's the same thing we've been saying about him time and time again, allergic to playmaking. So Joel says Devin was decent his first year. He was. He and maybe too much of it. You'd have to go back and watch, right? Because a lot of people say, well, the knock on Bush his rookie year was that people got too excited about the big plays and they didn't pay attention to the down-to-down basis part of it. Potentially that is true, right? I'd have to go back and watch tape. I remember thinking about Bush in his rookie year that he looked to be one of those guys who was going to eventually, ascend into the kind of player they wanted to be, the kind of sideline to sideline, very instinctual, playmaking type guy. I think someone brought up the stat. I don't have the stats in front of me right now. I guess I can look him up live on the air, but I believe the stat is that in the last 2 seasons, right, the 6 games he played before injury and then all of last season, Myles Jack has two tackles for loss at the inside linebacker spot. That is absurd. And there's no amount of, well, think about how bad the defensive line was. Well, think about, there's the ACL. There's no excusing that at the inside linebacker spot. Two, ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Julie says we need an inside linebacker to play with Jack. Okay, yes, I agree with that. And maybe in the long term, my hope is that, I don't want to get too ahead of myself here, but my hope is that Buddy Johnson could turn into that guy. Am I starting the Buddy Johnson hype train? You were here. Yes, they are eventually going to need an inside linebacker to go along with him. But again, maybe this is the optimist in me, because where you're seeing the glass as half empty and saying that, well, they need another linebacker to go alongside Myles Jack, my brain keeps going to the place of, imagine if Jacksonville didn't cut Myles Jack. Imagine if they didn't, and the Steelers go into this season with the linebacking core of Devin Bush next to Robert Spillane. Anybody looking forward to that? That was a real possibility. I mean, Myles Jack getting cut was absurd. A crazy move on Jacksonville's part, but one that we've seen them do time and time again, right? That's just a poorly run organization. They proved that throughout the years. And I think they signed Myles Jack like a day later, 2 days later. It didn't take very long for that to get done because the Steelers knew exactly, fix, yes. So, yeah, I mean, look, of course, the Steelers do not have a completely solved position at inside linebacker. But I'm not going to complain about this team having Myles. I'm not going to complain that they don't have another great player like Myles Jack alongside him, right? I'm going to put up with the fact that, yeah, Devin and Robert Spillane are going to make a lot of us mad watching the Steelers this year. But it could be only one of them on a play-to-play basis is going to do that. Whereas it could have been two. Q here asks if I'll be in Jacksonville on Saturday. I will not. I will not be in Jacksonville. I'm probably going to miss the game. In fact, I'm going out to dinner. It is my wife's birthday. So I'm hoping, though. I'm hoping. I'm going to do a live stream here. I'm going to promise it here, which whenever I promise something, I definitely do not deliver it. That's kind of been the story of Steeler country to thus far. So I'm going to try and do a live stream of the third preseason game. That will be a game where hopefully we're going to see like 3/4 of Kenny Pickett. So I'm hoping to do a live stream here on Steeler country of the third preseason game, but I will not be watching the Jacksonville game in Jacksonville. In fact, I won't see it live likely. And I will I'll certainly be back here, though, to break down that game. Julie says, how is the Highsmith injury? You would think that they would want, with Highsmith and where he is in his development. Highsmith gets talked about as this, I don't know, people. Well, maybe it's just, this is where like the AFC North talk of my brain, the AFC North talk part of my brain comes in, where like I hear so much from those guys that they feel like Highsmith was a bust, that like that seeps in, and all of a sudden I start thinking like, is Highsmith a bust? But he's not. I mean, it's very clearly not. He's just, he's not elite already, right? I think a lot of people expected, because of how well he did his rookie season, that you're going to put him alongside TJ Watt and he's going to immediately be an elite player. That didn't happen for him, but I don't think he was a bad player a year ago. I think 8 sacks, right? I think he only had like maybe 32, 35 pressures, something like that. I mean, clearly he has room to grow here. But you would expect that a guy like that is not someone who I think the Steelers are going to potentially, hold out forever when it comes to trying to get that kid reps in camp. And so I do worry about, I think it's a rib. They're not saying what it is, actually. I think it's a rib or a hip or something like that. Something in his midsection that is the issue there. He's not practicing yet. I would guess he's not going to play against Jacksonville. And if they hold the starters out, he's a guy who, if they hold the starters out against the Lions, my guess would be they're going to play him anyway. All right, here we go. Look at this. Look, Julie, not worried about the defensive line, nor is George, nor is Nick. He says, with our defensive line, the inside linebackers should be clean. Well, Myles knows how to stay clean. So that's a plus. Look, I don't know. The defensive line, I'm also probably not worried about the defensive line. Certainly not as much as it was a year ago, right? As I said, Henry Mondo is not going to make this roster. That's a guy who played 250, 300 snaps for this team a year ago. Same thing with like Carlos Davis, played a bunch of reps for this team a year ago, right? Isaiah Buggs was a guy from a year ago. These are guys who are just not even going to be on the roster this year. So I do think, I expect the defensive line is going to be improved. Although I should say, if you're expecting Ogunjobi to come in here and be this big run stuffer, I mean, it's just not who he's been in his career. Potentially, Tomlin and this team could unlock something about him, but maybe. And that, once again, we're ever the optimist here, if you believe that, though, because Ogunjobi's a rush specialist. Tomlin said it in his opening press conference at training camp. He said, look, Ogunjobi's a rush specialist. That's what he is. That's why they got him. I wonder, when we start talking about rundowns versus pass downs at the nickel, when we talk about Mollett versus Sutton versus Norwood and all that, I wonder if Ogunjobi's, if it's 3rd and 1, is Ogunjobi on the field, or is that Chris Wormley, or is that Loudermilk, or is that someone else who the Steelers feel more comfortable in a run heavy set. And then, here we go. We talk about Alualu because we need to talk about Alualu for sure. Gary says, I'm super excited Alualu is back. Well, Loudermilk and Leal, the future of the defense. Once again, I don't want to get ahead of myself when you say things like Leal and Loudermilk are the future of the defense. Did have that thought though. Going through the tape, it was like, yo, these kids are young. These kids are super young, and they're putting some stuff on tape that, you talk about, young players you just want to build on things from here. As I said, I don't know that Loudermilk's going to be a star this year. I don't think Leal is going to be a star by any stretch this year, but they're putting some things on tape in preseason that you like to see out of young guys because you can certainly build on that kind of thing. Now, to go back to Alualu. All right, let's talk about Tyson Alualu for a second. Tyson Alualu was 35, coming off of a year-long injury. This guy's been injured twice now in the last 2 seasons he's played. He had the MCL in that year back in 2020. And last year, he basically sat out the entire year. Dude's 35 years old. Love Tyson Alualu. I think he was tremendous for this team. And what he did for that run defense is undeniable. You could just look at the splits. With Alualu in the lineup healthy, this run defense was fantastic. You took him out, this run defense just became, it was the walls came down. Water came flooding in. Just run after run. I worry about this team putting so much on his back once again. I mean, as a 35-year-old player, he came into camp this year with knee swelling. Tomlin said it was probably from rehab or something like that. I don't care. I mean, again, 35-year-old player. Are we expecting that we're going to get 17 quality games out of Tyson Alualu in 2022? And is he going to once again be this kind of? Are we expecting? Is the expectation of his defensive line? Ogunjobi's not a great run stopper, right? So they're not bringing in Ogunjobi to be like this, supreme run stopper in there. Montravius Adams was fine a year ago. I think I'm happy with Montravius coming back. Certainly, they're better off having him than Henry Mondo. Wormley's, he's a fine player, but as I said, he did not have a great game in this one. And we talked about Loudermilk and Leal. Young players will need to develop. So how much of this kind of improved defensive line or improved run defense how much are we putting on the shoulders of a guy who spent 2 years injured and is 35 years of age? That's the one worry I have about this defense in general. But again, if you've listened to me on other shows, I think this run defense being bad was actually a plus for this team a year ago. And depending on how this offense looks, maybe a plus again. If the other team, the Steelers, what did they do last year? They played a bunch of games where it was real low scoring and it was real ugly. And it was just, the Steelers are going to try and run the ball, and they're not very good at it. But if the other team comes in and says, hey, we want to run the ball too, and both teams kind of handshake agree before the game, like, we're just going to run the ball a lot and run the clock out, and we're going to shorten this game. The Steelers are like, yeah, cool, awesome. That's what we want to do too, because we think we're not going to score a bunch of points. So we're just going to wait it out till the end and try to win this thing with Ben. How many times did they do that last year? George says Adams is pretty young too, loves being here. I think Adams, I'm really happy they brought Adams back because I think Adams is just a solid player. Again, not going to light up the stat sheet, not going to be a highlight reel type player. But again, there's a big difference between your average NFL player who can just, on a play-to-play basis, just be where you're supposed to be and consistent. Not a playmaker, not an Aaron Donald type, but just a fine player. And like what they have are Henry Mondo and, all the other guys they have on the back end of that defensive line. So I am excited. I mean, again, I'm probably more excited about Adams than I am Alualu. To be quite honest with you. Kenny says we need to stop the run this year. Do we? It is. I did have the thought when they started saying we're going to run more dime this year. Everyone's talking about they're going to run more dime this year. It's like, well, you don't defend the run in dime. But if you don't want to defend the run, then. And again, I don't know if the Steelers don't want. Again, I should stop with this joke because I'm not saying that the Steelers went into last season like trying not to stop the run. Like it was a game plan that Tomlin had. I think it was just a happy accident that it happened for this team. They happened to play some teams that felt like they could run the ball on the Steelers. That felt like that was an advantageous game plan coming in. And the Steelers, that was what they wanted to do. I mean, they wanted to be a team that was going to play really ugly offense. That's the whole Matt Canada short passing game, nothing over the middle, everything safe, no turnovers, right? Shorten this game. We're going to play solid defense in the red zone, make you kick field goals, low scoring game. We win it late because we got Ben Roethlisberger and you don't. And I don't think it was a game plan. I just think it was I think it was a happy accident, like I said. George says the safety is looking really solid with Minka, KZ, Edmonds, and Orwood. Yeah, I think credit to Kevin Colbert, right? Because he was responsible for all these players. Yeah, credit to him for kind of turning this room around. Long gone are the days of what was it? Mike Mitchell and Sean Davis and what was the kid from the AAF that they really liked? He started with a K. He played that one game. He played that one game against New England in the opener that year. It was before they traded for Minka. He was awful. Oh my God. And then they traded for Minka and everything changed. So yeah, credit to Kevin Colbert for turning this room around. This is a plus room for the Steelers now, where I think certainly prior to Minka, it was a minus room overall. Obviously, they got Minka, it turned into a plus room at the top, but then you worried about the back end of the room. I don't even worry about the back end of the room now. I mean, obviously, you don't want Minka to get hurt, but I'm not scared of Casey or Norwood on the field, right? I think Minka's obviously your playmaker. You need him out there. You hope that he can return back to the 4, 5, 6 interception a guy the year that he was a couple years prior. And you want that playmaking out there. But if he has to go down for a game or two, I don't worry about this turning into like, this back end of this defense is done. George says here, Bush is making business decisions. Bad ones. I mean, this is a guy he's in a contract year. The Steelers declined his option. He's basically trying out for 31 other teams right now. Well, 32, including the Steelers. I mean, clearly doesn't care if he's a Steeler. He said that in his interview where he said, whatever, I'm still going to be. What a stupid answer. I mean, again, this guy is a massive disappointment year over year, And so, like, have some pride. Again, I really did not like. I usually don't get on guys, but I really, really did not like that answer from Devin. Where he's like, "I'll be in the NFL next year." Like the lack of self-awareness there. Crazy. All right, what else we got here? Questions here. Carl says inside linebacker means a lot to the defense. I know it's not realistic to get Roquan, but what will it take, and would you do it? Usually I poo-poo these things. Usually, you get the whole. This always reminds me of back in the day when every Steeler message board was just filled with like, how do the Steelers get Darrelle Revis on their team? Darrelle Revis would get into free agency because Darrelle did a great job of just kind of constantly signing contracts that would get himself back into free agency. And then every Steeler message board is filled with like, the Steelers are going to sign Revis? They got to sign Revis. And it was never going to happen, but it was every Steeler fan's dream. And I usually poo-poo these kind of deals, right? These kind of like pie in the sky. Oh, great player comes along and the Steelers should trade for him. I'll be honest with you, though. I don't think this is that crazy. I think we'll probably take like a first-round pick and maybe a little more, But you're talking about adding another all-pro at clearly what is clearly the biggest weakness of this defense, which is the guy alongside Myles. You're talking about adding another superstar to this team. And yeah, I mean, you're going to take away a first-round pick, which you don't want to do because it's a young team still building. But you're going to have to pay a lot of money. But the money part of it, to me, I don't care. They don't have to pay a quarterback, right? Kenny's not getting paid for 4 or 5 years, right? I think go 4 years plus they go 4 years plus the 5th-year option, plus they could franchise them if they need to. They go the whole Lamar strat. We're just not going to pay you. We're just going to franchise tag you and see if you play on it. I don't think this is that crazy. I don't because I already think the Steelers are going to be a very, very good defense this year, like very good, borderline elite potentially. If things work out, again, certain guys need to stay healthy, as we talked about, because like Myles Jack goes down in this defense, and then it's there goes your elite defense. But no, I don't think this is that crazy. This would make the Steeler defense. We'll talk about them as like one of the best in the league. Well, secondary still is a question mark as far as the corner room, but yeah, I mean, Steelers did it before. They went out and got Minka. I don't know that they feel like this is as much of a necessity as Minka, because with Minka, they didn't have a playmaker in the secondary. Here, they're going to feel like they already have Myles Jack. You need to put another one next to it. My argument is, you're a team that wants to win defensively. Make sure that happens. All right. Let's see if we got any other questions here. We got what? Don C here. What? Don C is what? Ravens fan? Yeah, Ravens fan coming in. Yeah, he says about the Bengals and what on how good they are from a receiver perspective. It is interesting, this secondary, the fact that week one, by the way, Bengals Steelers is such an interesting matchup. I know Steeler fans are riding this high right now with Kenny and the way this offense played, and daydreaming about how good this defense can be now that they seemingly are more stable on the defensive line. They've got a guy like Myles Jack at linebacker. But But Burrow's going to put a ton of pressure. That wide receiver room is going to put a ton of pressure on a cornerback room that I like this room against 30 teams in the league. I don't love this room. I don't love what this room is going to be able to do against a team like the Bengals, because what Tomlin and company have always done is, you're going to bracket their best guy and just say, okay, if you can beat us with the other guys, that's fine, right? It's the classic thing that 08 defense did: take away your best option, make you beat us in other ways. You can't, T. Higgins is a star. I mean, T. Higgins is good, and this is a team a year ago that had a bad offensive line and dominated the Steelers when it came to that. I mean, they were the one team last year. When I talk about the whole, who cares that you could run on us because, we were just running clock. The Bengals weren't just running clock. I mean, they ran the ball down the Steelers' throat with Joe Mixon and a bad offensive line, punched it in for touchdown time after time. And it made look, let's be quite honest about what happened to the Bengals last year. They made the Steelers quit, And the craziest part about it is, this is how bad the matchup is for the Steelers. They made the Steelers quit in Hines, right? And then they said after the game, the Bengals openly said after the game, the Steelers quit in that game, which to me was insane to say that. Like, it did seem like it on the field. Like, you could see it on the field. Steelers pretty much quit at the end of that one. But then the Bengals said it out loud, clearly giving Tomlin and the Steeler team, just a little extra juice, right? Tomlin was going to use that. And I thought going into that second matchup, okay, now they're going to have TJ Watt, Deontay is healthy, right? I know it's in Cincinnati, but this should be at least a little more competitive than that first one. And that second game was that was the biggest whooping the Steelers have taken in quite a while. Maybe going back to that Jaguars game in 17, or I guess the Patriots game to start 18. I mean, the whooping the Bengals put on the Steelers in that second game was crazy. And you're talking about the Steelers have lost to this team now 3 times in a row, and once with Ryan Finley. It's an awful matchup for the Steelers in week 1. But I'm not ruling it out. I think the Steelers, week 1 is the worst time to face them, because it's when this team can come, like they did last year with Allen. Part of the reason why they beat the Bills last year was because they got to play them in week 1, and the Steelers employed this whole thing where, like, we're not going to blitz this year. We're just not going to blitz. We're going to rush 4 a lot. We're going to get there with 4. And the Bills didn't see it coming. They got a bunch of pressure on Allen. Allen, they employed they employed all the defensive backs in that game because they knew Allen was going to try and throw every down. They got pressure with 4. And the Bills had no answer to that. And I'm not saying that there's something that the Steelers can do this year that is, it's going to be similar, but because, man, I mean, it's such a terrible matchup for the Bengals, or for the Bengals against Steelers. But never rule out Mike Tomlin. Never. Even though the Steelers have gotten their ass kicked by the Bengals in the last couple of times. All right, Pino here says, are you going to keep the channel going during the season? I'm going to try. The problem for me is life always gets in the way. Right, I got to do AFC North Talk twice a week. I got a full-time job. But yeah, I'm going to try and do this, though. I think doing it live is certainly a lot easier for me than kind of trying to talk into a camera without you guys in chat. So, yeah, expect to see more of me during the regular season. That is the plan. Okay, and the last one here, just here says, second game had no one on Chase, but also Mike Hilton feeding them the entire plan. It was the Bengals were the better. Not only were the Bengals a better team, like they knew it. I mean, they had I remember saying after that second game, like, just openly questioning, okay, which of these Steeler guys even wants to be here anymore? It was like, okay, clearly that team last year, the Steeler team, wasn't good at that point in the season, but that was such an un-Steeler like, un-Mike Tomlin performance from that team in general. Like, his teams, it's the antithesis. The Mike Tomlin thing is like, Steeler football is 60 minutes. It's never going to be pretty, but throw style points out the window, but we'll find a way to get the job done. So watching that team get so thoroughly beaten and be so, like, just having no life whatsoever, it was a strange feeling, because that's not who a Mike Tomlin team is. Look, Mike Tomlin teams run into better teams all the time, but they show, look at that game against Kansas City in the playoffs. Like, the Steelers weren't going to win that game in Kansas City, but they put up a hell of a fight. I mean, they were up 7-0 in the second quarter of that game. I mean, they eventually get blown out. But yeah, I just thought that for me was the issue with that game, is that the Steelers had no life to them. And that's just not a trait that you normally see from a Mike Tomlin-led team. All right, one more. Am I excited for Brian Flores? I think he's an awesome young coach. Yeah, I think, Flores clearly got a bad rap a little bit in Miami at the end there, not to go too deep on the NFL, but I thought it's hilarious. I think it's hilarious, absolutely hilarious, that they found all of Brian Flores' allegations about the Miami Dolphins were accurate, right? They said, oh yeah, all that's true. And we're going to take away first round picks and we're going to, suspend the owner and all that. And then the one thing it wasn't true, he wasn't offered to, the whole like, hey, he was offered to lose games, the whole, the integrity of the game thing. No. That part's not. Everything else, yes, definitely. All the tampering happened. Yup, all this happened. Was he paid to lose games? No, definitely not. Definitely not. Sure. All right. That is going to do it for me today. Thank you all for watching and listening. I will be back, I hope, tomorrow. Tomorrow's Friday. Yeah. Going to be back tomorrow, I think, after AFC North talk. I think I'm going to do a short stream here going over things to watch in that Jaguars game. So catch me then. If you don't, I'll be back next week to recap Jaguars Steelers preseason game number 2. We're seeing Kenny Pickett with the second team. Let's go, Kenny. Right here on Steeler Country.